Chapter 1. A Cold Place Without Stars. The last thing Ethan Cole saw in his first life was the sky coming apart. It was the autumn of 2036, and over the ruins of Seattle the clouds had turned the color of a deep bruise, purple shot through with veins of sick green light. People called that light the tide. By then everyone had stopped pretending it was weather. It poured down out of the torn sky, and where it touched the earth changed, concrete softened like wax, steel grew teeth, and men and women who had been ordinary an hour before stood up with burning eyes and did things that ordinary men and women could not do. Ethan had never been one of them. For 44 years he had been exactly what the world made him, a tired man with a mortgage, a back that ached, and a heart full of people he had already failed. When the tide came, the strong rose and the weak were swept away. Ethan was weak. He remembered running. He remembered a sound like a mountain breathing. He remembered, at the very end, that he was not thinking of himself at all. He was thinking of his father, dead since 1999, and of his little sister, and of a friend named Marcus who had drowned at 14, and he was thinking the same thing he had thought every single day of his gray and ordinary life. If I had only known. If I could only go back. Then the world ended, and Ethan fell into a cold place without stars. There was no time in that place. There was no up, no down, no breath, no body. There was only the cold, and a vast attention pressing against him from every direction at once, the way deep water presses against a man sinking past the point where light can reach. He had the sense, distant, dreamlike, that he was being read. That something turned him over the way a child turns a stone, looking at the strange, wet life clinging to its underside. And then a voice that was not a voice said one word into the center of him. Again. The cold cracked like ice on a pond, and Ethan fell through. He woke screaming, and the scream came out wrong. It was too high. It was too small. It scraped out of a throat the size of a thumb, a thin, furious, helpless wail, and the moment he heard it Ethan knew with absolute certainty that something was monstrously wrong. He tried to sit up. His body would not obey him. His arms came up into his blurred field of vision, and they were tiny, soft, fat-creased things, the hands curling into fists no bigger than walnuts. They shook. He could not make them stop shaking. He tried to speak, to say, "What is this? What's happening to me?" And what came out was another wail, longer than the first. Panic is a strange thing in a body that small. It has nowhere to go. It simply fills you up and overflows, and you cry, because crying is the only tool you have. Ethan cried. He lay on his back on a thin mattress, hemmed in on 4 sides by white-painted wooden bars, and above him a mobile turned slowly in a draft he could not feel, little felt stars and a crescent moon, revolving. The ceiling beyond it was water-stained in one corner in the shape of a comma. He knew that stain. He had stared at that stain 10,000 times as a child without ever once really seeing it, and now it reached down out of 44 years of distance and closed around his throat. He knew this room. The crying brought footsteps. They came quick and light down a hallway he could not see, and then the door opened and a woman crossed the room to him, and Ethan's whole mind went white. She was young. That was the thing that broke him in the end, not the small hands, not the bars of the crib, not even the impossible ceiling. It was that his mother was young. The Susan Cole that Ethan carried in his memory had been a worn woman with gray in her hair and a permanent tightness around the eyes. A woman who had buried a husband at 34 and worked 2 jobs until the work hollowed her out. The woman who leaned over the crib now had smooth hands and dark hair and tired, gentle, unmarked eyes, and she was smiling down at him with no grief in her at all, because the grief had not happened yet. "Hey, hey," she murmured and lifted him, and the whole world tilted and swung. SHH, baby. Bad dream. Did you have a bad dream?" Her voice went straight through him like a blade going in clean. Ethan, who had not wept at his own funeral because there had been no one left to hold one, pressed his ruined small face into his mother's shoulder and shook. "There it is," Susan whispered, rubbing slow circles on a back that fit in the palm of her hand. "There it is. Mommy's got you. Ethan's okay. Ethan's okay. Ethan." She said his name. So it was still his name. Whatever this was, however impossible, he was still himself. Over her shoulder, through the bars of his own swimming vision, Ethan saw the rest of the room. He saw a changing table with a box of diapers on it, a brand he hadn't seen on a store shelf in decades. He saw a calendar pinned to the wall by the door, a cheap thing with a photograph of a lighthouse, and at the top of it, printed in friendly red letters above the grid of days, a number. He stopped breathing. 1994. Later, he could not have said how much later, because a 2-year-old has no grip on time, and his grown mind kept sliding off the edges of the small body like a man trying to stand on ice. He lay in the dark and made himself think. He was Ethan Cole. He had been born in May of 1992. If the calendar on the wall was true, and the smallness of his hands was true, and his mother's unlined face was true, then it was 1994 and he was 2 years old, and every one of the 42 years he remembered after this night had not happened. Not yet. A man does not accept a thing like that all at once. Ethan's mind threw itself against it again and again. A dream, a delusion, the tide did something to me at the end. I'm dying in 2036 right now, and this is what dying feels like. And each time it slid back off and left him exactly where he was, lying in a crib under a slow-turning moon, alive, small, and 44 years old behind the eyes. But Ethan had been an ordinary man, and ordinary men learn one thing well if they learn nothing else: how to keep going when the truth is too big to hold. So he stopped trying to hold all of it. He set the impossible down where he could not see it. And into the empty, terrible quiet it left behind, one single thought rose up out of the deep, the way a body rises slowly to the surface of a cold lake. It was not a thought about himself. It was a date. His father, David Cole, a carpenter with sawdust permanently worked into the creases of his big, careful hands, had died on a job in the year 1999. A truck, a wet road, a thing that took 4 seconds and unmade a family. Ethan had been 7. He had spent the next 37 years learning, slowly and completely, exactly how much a 7-year-old can fail to understand about loss. 1999. In the dark, in a body that could not yet walk, Ethan Cole did the arithmetic, and the answer rose up and would not sink again. 5 years. He had 5 years. His tiny fists closed in the dark, and they did not shake.